I'd like just firstly to welcome our two new members, Rob Winter and Dave Merritt. So welcome to your first committee as official members. This is an additional meeting, and it's being held to enable members to consider and sign off minutes of previous meetings, but also to receive the audit opinion and sign off the annual accounts for 22-23. The meeting therefore doesn't include our usual standard agenda items. Okay. So agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Have we got any?
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies for absence from Councillor Carol Pattison, Kirklees Council, Councillor Ellen Lamb, Leeds Council, Councillor Denise Jeffrey, Wakefield Council, but Councillor Matthew Morley is attending as her substitute.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? No? And there are no matters which require the exclusion of the press or public. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda items 4 to 6, which relate to minutes and notes from previous meetings. Agenda item 4 is to review and approve the minutes of the last meeting, which is held on the 7th of March. Any changes or comments from anybody on those, or are we happy to approve? Yep. We can note those as approved, please. And then agenda item 5 and 6 are to receive notes of the informal meetings, one held on Thursday the 1st of August and one held on Monday the 28th of October. So if we can note that those have been received. Thank you. So if we move on to the substantive agenda item, which is agenda item 7, and this is to receive the auditor's report and to approve the annual accounts for 22-23. Just to note, the draft accounts have already been considered by the committee and have been published, but today members should note that in accordance with government guidance around managing the backlog of public sector accounts, the accounts that we're going to look at and considerations today won't be audited, but you'll go into that more for us, won't you, Alistair, and explain what that means in practice. So could I pass over to who's presenting this? Angela?
I was going to do since
Angela and Alistair. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So the paper here sets out the current position with we're looking at the 2022-23 annual accounts. Attached to the paper you have got the 2 letters for those charged with governance, which you saw last time. We said we're making some minor amendments. They have been done, so this is a final version in front of you today. We also have the audit completion report. Part of that audit completion report includes the letter of representation that we're required to provide. So there is a copy of that we put onto our letterhead attached. You also had circulated separately the actual wording of the audit opinion, which Alistair will talk to as part of the audit completion report. So you hopefully have the pack of papers and that document with you. This is quite a unique position. I don't think I've never been in a position of bringing forward a set of accounts to be signed off or as concluded that haven't been audited. I'm probably one of many Section 151 and Section 73 officers who are in the same position, and you may have already been through this at local authorities. I think this is the history of this has been well discussed through this committee, and I don't think what you've got today will be any surprise for those members who've been here longer than just today. We've considered this at most meetings, and I think we've seen this day coming for some time. So, in effect, you are being asked to approve the 2022-23 accounts without an audit opinion, or with a different audit opinion than the one usually seen. But I'll let Alistair explain that part in a moment. I think just to say in terms of reassurance, and that's why I said I would come back for this meeting and lead this item. I signed off the accounts for audit, so there is an element of you have my assurances that the accounts were prepared in accordance with the relevant legislation and requirements. We acknowledge that they were published after the official date. Again, we've had those discussions through this committee where we had said we were hoping to finalise, keeping the accounts open to do final changes up to the point of audit, and then it became obvious that wasn't going to happen, so we did finalise and publish them. Clearly, we talked, I think, the last meeting or the one before, that we are back in the regime now of, irrespective of audit, I think it caught us all unawares that there was going to be this mistiming of audited accounts and audit work happening. But going forward, we have a robust plan, and we will stick to the timescales that have been set, so that the accounts will be done, and we hope we will get back into a normal rhythm. And I'm sure Alice, I think, wishes the same as well. This isn't easy for either us or the auditors, to be fair. So I can give you some comfort that I believe the accounts were properly prepared. You don't have the benefit of the audit opinion having been, the auditors having been able to undertake work on it due to the backlog and the timescales. So I think probably at that point, probably worth, Alice, do you want to talk through what you have done, because there has been some work done, and where we get to is probably,
When you do that, Alice, for the benefit, especially of the new members, touch on the significant risks and also the audit delays that are detailed in the report. That'd be useful. Thank you.
I will, Debbie. Yes, thank you, and thanks, Angela, for that introduction. Yes, interesting observation, Angela. As probably one of your final acts is signing off a set of accounts to have a disclaimer opinion, and for new members to the committee, your first meeting of the committee is receiving a report where there's a disclaimer. From my position, 32 years doing this job, and I signed my first disclaimer opinion last week. I'm probably going to be signing another 8 in the next week or so. So that's the first observation, is that this unfortunately is far from an uncommon situation now in local government. By way of background, so I'll talk to Appendix 2, which is my audit completion report in the agenda paper, but for the benefit of all members, but especially new members, a little bit of back history as to how we've ended up where we've ended up in the sector. Excuse me. There are many hundreds of sets of local authority accounts which are unaudited. The history as to how that has occurred is long and complicated, with lots of factors in play, including technical accounting issues that have taken a long while to resolve nationally, which delayed historical audits, shortages of staff on both council, local authority and audit sides, which has meant audits have taken longer to complete, and small matter of a worldwide pandemic, which rather scuppered the normal system of operation that Angela referred to, where auditors would come into an audited body, start work and finish pretty swiftly and leave the organisation to their day jobs. All those things built up an enormous backlog. There have been extensive discussions over the past year to 18 months as to try and get a practicable as possible solution to this problem, and the government's solution, which it issued in the summer, was to apply a series of what are now known as backstop dates, where local authorities are required to publish their audited accounts by a certain date, regardless of whether the audit is complete or not. If the audit is complete, that audit opinion will be an unqualified audit opinion. If the audit hasn't been completed, then the audit opinion will be modified either by a specific qualification or a disclaimer opinion. The first of those backstop dates is next Friday, Friday the 13th. I don't know quite why the person doing this must have had a little warped sense of humour in picking Friday the 13th as the first of those dates, not wishing any further issues to be caused. But the first of those dates is the 13th of December, and that's for all years up to and including 22-23. So that is why we're discussing your 22-23 accounts, to enable you to publish your audited accounts, albeit with a disclaimer opinion, by that deadline date and meet that statutory responsibility that now exists. There are then subsequently backstop dates for each subsequent year. The next one of those for the 23-24 year is the 28th of February next year, which, if we take out a couple of unproductive weeks over Christmas, means pretty much 2 months from now is the next backstop date. So there is no likelihood of the 23-24 combined authority accounts having an unqualified opinion. The 23-4 necessarily will have a disclaimer. Pretty much that's the position across the whole sector, is that the way that the dates have fallen, the government dates have fallen, if you have a disclaimer on 22-23, you will be having a disclaimer on 23-24. It's a really regrettable situation. I didn't get into this job to give disclaimer opinions. I and my employer, we believe passionately in the value of public audit, and we're really keen to rebuild that assurance position and as quickly as possible get to a position where we can give unqualified opinions on the combined authority accounts. I'll touch on that at the end. In terms of the, so I hope that's a useful bit of a history lesson for members. In terms of the document and the audit, we've set out in our audit it's a formal requirement to report the completion of an audit, even where there has been very little audit work undertaken. And what you see in this appendix is our report from our audit work, setting out the reasons for the disclaimer and the various risks that we had identified. A couple of things it's important to point out. The combined authority is a group, because it consolidates the Chief Constable for West Yorkshire Police's accounts into the combined authority group accounts. You can see on my report, page 8, on the group audit approach, that we confirmed that we completed the audit of the Chief Constable's accounts for 22-23 and gave an unqualified opinion on those accounts. The date on that is actually the wrong date. That's thinking we were talking about 23-24 when we signed the Chief Constable's accounts in October. The date of signing the Chief Constable's accounts for the previous year was around a year earlier than that. But that audit was unqualified. In terms of the significant risk areas that we would identify, there are 3 of them that if we had done work, we would have done work over. They are all very either required by auditing standards to be focused at a significant risk level, or they are of such magnitude and of such complexity that auditors across the sector will be identifying those as significant risk areas. So those are the valuation of pension assets and liabilities and the valuation of operational land and buildings and investment properties. To confirm, we haven't undertaken any audit work on those areas. We have conducted the planning procedures we needed to undertake and some basic checks on the accounts, such as are required by auditing standards. We report on report page 12, one amendment which the authority picked up in terms of classifying £15 million of investments, moving that between cash and short-term investments. That's purely a classification adjustment that was made in the accounts that you now have as the final set. We haven't identified any control weaknesses from any of our procedures that we did carry out. And in terms of the final thing to say on the appendix, excuse me, is our work on the authority's value for money arrangements. We did complete that. We reported that earlier in the year, and that commentary and those conclusions will be incorporated in the final report that I issue when I've signed the audit opinion, and that's called the Auditor's Annual Report, which summarises all the work for the year, and I have that ready to send out to Gary and Angela as soon as I've signed the opinion, and that commentary you have already seen. It came to, I think it may have been the March meeting, but it may have been earlier. My memory fades over the course of the last few weeks, never mind the last few months. So I mentioned the rebuilding assurance. I think a couple of things to add to that for members. One, I think Angela made some really perceptive comments for you as a committee for how you get assurance on a statement of accounts which is going to have a disclaimed audit opinion on it, because I am giving you no assurance on those accounts as a result. However, Angela is signing her statement of responsibilities. That gives you assurance of the processes and the assurance that Angela has in order to be satisfied those accounts are true and fair. There is also the annual governance statement processes that the authority has in place to satisfy itself that it has a system of corporate governance that is operating effectively, and integral to that are Bronwyn's head of internal audit opinion and the programme of work that internal audit carry out in order to provide assurance to the authority that there are no significant weaknesses in any of those controls. Those are really important matters for the committee to be reassured on in the absence of me giving you external audit reassurance. And the final thing in terms of rebuilding our assurance and the assurance that we provide on the authority's accounts, that is something that the national stakeholders in these discussions are still finalising the fine details on what that looks like. The National Audit Office have issued some wonderfully named documents called LARIGs, which I can't recall what the acronym stands for, but it is about the process for issuing disclaimer opinions and then rebuilding assurance. So there is a general framework in place for that, but the specific detail as to what that entails, how I go about rebuilding assurance, where I've got a set of accounts that I've provided no assurance over, that detail is still being subject to discussions and agreement across the audit firms, the National Audit Office, the Ministry, the Financial Reporting Council, all those stakeholders, and SIP for all those stakeholders in the sector. Once that is known and once I've got a clear view on what it entails to rebuilding assurance, then I'll be having conversations with the finance team, Angela's replacement as Section 73 officer, to establish what it entails and how quickly we will be able to rebuild assurance. My focus is on doing that as quickly as possible, but it is probably unrealistic to think that it's going to take 1 year to do that. So I will come back to committee once we've got that detail and be able to give you a clearer view and a timetable on when we can rebuild that, because that is, from your perspective, that is critical that you have sight of that and you have the opportunity to scrutinise that and ask questions and understand that process. So I hope that's helpful. I'll pause, Chair, at that point, but happy to take anyone's questions.
Thank you for that. I think that's really concise. So I think we're facing three things, aren't we? First question is, are we content with what things look like now, that the committee is happy to sign things off? And then I think there's a separate issue for the committee to consider, which is whether we feel we've got sufficient information, given that we're going to have limited opinion as well moving forward in the interim period. But I think that's probably for the next meeting to consider that. And then, as you say, there's that rebuilding of assurance. I think there's three elements to this, isn't there, that the committee needs to be comfortable with moving forward. So have any members got any queries now on the... Yes, Rob. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just picking up on the last point I think Alistair made really about rebuilding assurance, and whilst this is almost the perfect storm and you couldn't really write this, from a Mazars point of view, what's changed or what is going to change in your capacity that will help with you, help us rebuild that assurance? Because obviously there's a huge issue within the capacity of all the firms. So from a combined authority perspective, what assurances can we receive about Mazars' approach to that?
A really good question. Thank you, Rob. In terms of Mazars, so to reassure you on the kind of large picture of Fulvis Mazars, I need to keep saying Fulvis Mazars rather than just Mazars, because otherwise someone's going to tell me off internally. We have a significant public sector team across the country, well over 150 auditors who just audit NHS and local government in our public sector teams. We are focused entirely on that public sector market, and that's really crucial to us, so I don't do anything other than local authorities and the NHS. Those of you who are aware of the timeframes for that, the NHS audit window is a very prescribed time constrained period. The rest of the year is devoted to local authority accounts, much more than half the year to local authority accounts. Within our Leeds-based team, we have 30, I've lost the number now, it's between 30 and 40 auditors, through to myself and the partners who work in the Leeds audit. Our resourcing, if I'm honest, our resourcing has never been the major issue. We have the capacity to deliver our portfolio of work, and predominantly because we are only focused on local authorities and the NHS. So the issue for us has been the fact that those initial audits around 2019, 2021, when the local authority technical issues struck significantly, COVID delayed things, that caused a lengthening to those years' audits, which meant that the cycle of audits were then out of tune with the normal reporting. That then caused an extra strand because new issues came to light, which impacted on the combined authority when we were about to sign off, but another issue nationally came to light, so we had to pause until that was resolved, and that took another 3 to 4 months to resolve nationally. So the issue for us was never capacity, it was timing and the backlog that we became the hostages to, if you like. So I'm really confident that once we get through the next few months, and we are all working on 24-25, subject to how much rebuilding work needs to go on for the retrospective years, I'm really confident that we will get into that cycle that we were in pre-COVID of being able to start and finish audits in the appropriate time frame. Does that help?
Jay.
Thank you, and thank you for that summary. And sad person as that I am, I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed reading Angela's heartfelt declarations. I think the chair posed the question, are we content as a committee? And I have the advantage of having had the cumulative experience of sitting in this committee, and I was applying those questions really as we went through in terms of, have we as a committee been satisfied around some of the issues of governance? Have we been satisfied that we've had a dive into value for money, reporting systems, whistleblowing, all those things that we've looked at over the period of the year? So my answer is really that I do feel content. I think we should be content as a committee that we have had sufficient information. And there is a tendency, even though there are hundreds of other councils in this position, you see the disclaimer and you think, that's terrible. Actually, I do feel that underlying foundation sense of contentment that yes, we have done those things. Actually, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I tend to agree, and Bronwyn, even your audit programme has been adapted as this situation has been coming to life, hasn't it? So I think we've adapted to address some of those risks and make sure we are sighted as far as we can be on it.
That is correct. We are building in more financial controls work now, and there will be significant amount of work next year as well, just to make sure that we can continue to give those assurances. And there's nothing we're worried about at this point. So we'll keep making sure that we at least do what we can do to give the committee the assurance it needs.
That's lovely, and as I said before, if we could do a bit of more of a deep dive on that at the next meeting, I think that would be really useful. Any other queries, Rob?
Thanks, Chair. Just picking up on that internal audit matter, and you've answered my question significantly, Bronwyn, about using internal audit a bit differently in the absence of external, and I know that the two aren't the same and can't rely on each other. But if that's the case, and that's going to be the case sort of moving forward a little bit, what's being compromised out of the internal audit plan because you're doing more on work that you wouldn't necessarily be doing because of the normal arrangements?
That's a really good question, and one of the things we're trying to build at pace at the moment is the use of data analytics to do a lot of our testing for us. So historically, we've always had data analytics at our disposal, but we've not used it as consistently as we would have liked to do. A lot of that was tied up in the historic systems that we had here, moving to a new system. So we had loads of issues around how do you interrogate the data that has been through quite a significant process of cleanse and change, etc. So we're in a much better position now to use the data analytics quite effectively. We're doing that in the first instance around VAT reporting at the moment, because we are anticipating an HMRC audit on VAT. So we're prioritising that, and we will keep prioritising everything that needs prioritising. But inevitably it is going to mean that some of the strategic reviews that we would have planned to do, we will have to defer. However, we are trying to make sure that what we do is a balance across the CA, so that we don't end up with some big pockets of areas that we cannot give that broader assurance opinion around. We're also looking to bring in some co-source support to do some additional auditing. So my team are at the moment trying to look at making some direct awards. It's not as easy as it sounds because everyone's in the same boat and we're all fighting over the same resource pool. But we are working very hard to try and get some additional capacity, and particularly around our transport scheme. So bus franchising and mass transit, we really want to make sure we cover sufficiently those areas of responsibility. So yeah, there's a lot of plates spinning, catching balls, juggling, but we will absolutely try and make sure that we use every avenue that's available to us, including recruitment. So we are looking to bring more resource in, and we have 2 auditors starting in January. So we will keep you posted, obviously.
Thank you. Any other queries? No? So can I ask members to confirm, please, if they approve the accounts? Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Keep